Hi, I'm Dave Bob, and this is a Code Sherpa's Trail Guide on using Gitflow. First, I have a confession. For years, I was a Subversion user, and when I first started using Git, I used it like Subversion with an extra staging area. I was afraid of branches. I mean, isn't every Subversion user? When I first started dabbling with branches, I really couldn't figure out why everyone thought it was so much better. The conflicts, I'd end up in these weird states with detached heads, I'd have problems with local versus remote tracking. It all just seemed more difficult than it had to be. If you came from Subversion, you probably know just what I'm talking about. Maybe you're still a Git novice, in which case you're really going to like what you're about to see. Maybe you're a Git intermediate and you still reference a cheat sheet that shows you how to push a local branch and set it up for tracking. I think you're in the sweet spot for using Gitflow. And maybe you're a Git expert, in which case you might think what you're about to see is a little limiting. And while I might agree, let me get on a soapbox here for a second. I've come to think of Git as not a version control tool, but as a series of ingredients with which you can build a complete configuration management process. And all processes are about constraining what is possible. Seriously, any process you look at is about taking the world of possibilities and reducing it to a smaller set that's easier to learn and has more predictable touch points for humans to interact with it. Gitflow is no different. It takes a world of possibilities you can do with normal Git command line and creates some higher level abstractions that make things easier. There can be a lot of benefit here to a team, but your mileage may vary. But Gitflow isn't really in your way. Git is still there, and you can still do everything you might want to do from the command line. So what is Gitflow? Simply put, it's a series of naming and branching conventions used with Git to enforce a team-wide process for handling development branches, releasing, and supporting production code. Just a little over a year ago, Vincent Dreesen published this blog post describing the processes his team used. This wasn't necessarily a unique process at the time. A lot of what he writes about you can find in Git books and other blog entries, but to his credit, he described it very well, and he also took it to the next level with a Git project that helped define and enforce the concepts. This is the Gitflow homepage on GitHub. The project is a series of extensions to Git that enforce the model he describes in his blog. Today we'll be looking at the methodology as well as this tool, and we'll use it on a real-world project. And finally, there's the testimonial blogs. Jeff Kreeftmeijer wrote this blog entry, which is the one that finally got me over the intimidation of the diagram in the original blog entry, and it got me using Gitflow. Thanks, Jeff. So today we're going to use Gitflow. We'll install it on my Mac, and we're going to start a new Rails 3 project, put it on GitHub, and use Gitflow to support branches for development, release, production, and hotfixes. So this is the project we're going to be working on today. About 18 months ago, I took my website down for a redesign, got this far, and never really got it back up. This is a Rails 2.3.5 project, and it's stored in Subversion, and I'm basically going to just blow it away, start fresh with a Rails 3 project in GitHub, and copy over the CSS and image assets. So that's where we're going to start. Let's come over to a command line, where the first thing I need to do is install Gitflow. Now on my Mac I use Brew. If you're on something other than a Mac, or if you use some other package management system or want to install from source, it's all a piece of cake. And Gitflow is now installed. So let's start our Rails project. I'm going to say Rails new Dave Bach www. I'm going to cd down into that. And then I'm going to create an RVMRC file. If you're not familiar with the Ruby version manager, check out a future screencast or look online. That's not something I'm going to go into today. And then I'm going to initialize Git, because that's what we're going to start storing this in. And then I'm going to make a small modification to my git ignore file to also ignore, because that's how I roll. Okay. Now I'm going to git add pretty much everything and git commit. We will say initial commit, and there we go. Now I'm going to push that up to GitHub, and now that we're up on GitHub, we can start talking about what we're going to do with Gitflow. So let's say git branch just to see where we are. Surprise, surprise, we have a master. So now starting to use Gitflow, I'm going to say git flow init. And it's going to ask me a few questions. What do we want the production release branch name to be? That's going to be master. We can change these conventions. I wouldn't recommend it to start just because you look for help online and people are talking about these in terms of the default conventions. Branch name for our next release development, that's going to be develop. Whenever we have feature branches, they're going to be prefixed with feature slash and release slash and hotfix slash and support slash. We'll go into most of those today. And we're done. So where are we? We've initialized Git, we've checked our project in, we've pushed it up to GitHub, and we've initialized Gitflow. Let's take a look at what branches we have. We have a develop and a master. Now develop is where we're going to be doing most of our work, but we have not pushed that to GitHub yet. This is still something we have to do a little bit manually. So I'm going to push origin to develop, and then I'm going to set the remote tracking branch for that. So now whenever we take a look at GitHub, it will have that branch. In fact, let's go do that. Here was my new GitHub project. We'll continue. And we'll see we have our default project. We have a develop and a master branch. I'm going to come back to the command line. And now I'm going to do a little bit of work on my Rails project. I'll be back when I have some stuff to commit. Okay, we're back, and we have a little bit of stuff here to commit. I'm using a free CSS library called FreshScent, and I have the CSS and the images. And if you notice, I had replaced one of the images earlier with my own mug, so that's part of this. Let's go ahead and commit that. Bunch of new files. I'm on the develop branch. Okay, so part of the methodology here is that the master branch is always code that's ready for production, and developers are developing on the develop branch. So that's what I'm about to do. I'm going to commit this stuff to the develop branch. And just so everybody up on GitHub can see what I'm doing, it's now pushed up there. So if this sits a little odd with you that I'm not committing to master, well, first realize that in Git, unlike other version control repositories, the name of the branch is no special meaning. Master is not some special place. It's just the name of a branch. That really could have been called anything. The convention to have that always production ready, well, that's a nice convention to have. I can live with that. If I can't live with that, we can change it when we first do the git init. Towards the end, I'll talk about why that can be a little bit of a painful thing to do. Okay, so I have my CSS committed, and I'm going to pause, go do some other work, and I will come back when we have some more stuff to check in. And we're back, and I've done a little bit of work while we've been gone. So I have a few new files and a few modified files, basically copying over some boilerplate from the old application. I'm still in my develop branch. Let's go ahead and commit this stuff. And I'm going to push that up to GitHub for the world to see. I want to do something a little bit different here. We're now about to start modifying the app in a meaningful way. And rather than just checking stuff into develop, I'm actually going to use Gitflow to create what's called a feature branch. Let's take a look at that. If I just type Gitflow, it gives me a few of the available subcommands. Gitflow feature tells me I can create a new feature branch. Now this is something you can do in Git. This isn't a big deal, but it's kind of nice to have this as an easy to use convention. Let's say Gitflow feature